So ever since I was a kid, I loved learning about the future of technology. And I love science fiction because even the most incredible ideas seemed obtainable. We just needed to wait a couple more years for flying cars, robot assistants, and the dreams of science fiction would become a reality. I would read the books of Michio Kaku, the theoretical physicist and futurist, where he describes the technologies that are currently being developed and the timeline for when we can expect incredible life-changing, paradigm-shifting technology to affect the way that we live. I would even read popular science articles about the research being done, lab-grown organs that would save lives, biofuels made from corn that would reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, and worms that could digest plastic and eliminate plastic waste. I've been following nuclear fusion research for over a decade, waiting for it to become commercially viable. And so far, I haven't seen any of these things make a substantial impact on the world's problems. Because the truth is that it takes a lot of time and money and dedicated effort to take these technologies from the lab environment and implement them commercially. So after admittedly being let down by the pace of technology, I wanted to know, what can I get excited for? What are the biggest technologies that are being implemented commercially this very moment that will end up affecting our lives in the next 5 years? So I did some research, and I was actually pleasantly surprised with some of the applications of technology that we can expect in the very near term. First off, artificial intelligence. I know it's an obvious one, but it's so huge and it relates directly to my field, so I had to cover it first. So I want to quickly explain the difference between artificial general intelligence and narrow artificial intelligence. Artificial general intelligence you can think of as near human level intelligence, like iRobot, if you've seen that movie. And we are still a ways off from fully achieving this. We're getting there for sure, but it's going to take some time still. And I want this video to focus on technologies being implemented today, which brings us to narrow artificial intelligence. This kind of AI touches more aspects of our lives than I can even talk about and cover and keep this video a reasonable length. There are recommendation algorithms for YouTube, Netflix, Instagram that keep people engaged with an application. There are models which optimize supply chains, making businesses run more smoothly. We have Alexa and Google Assistant that can respond to our voices and answer our questions, and so many more applications of AI. But most exciting to me are the applications of AI in automation. At this moment, across the country, restaurants, particularly fast food restaurants, are implementing automated AI solutions for their restaurant operations. Take one example, Flippy, the burger flipping robot that is currently being developed by Miso Robotics. It utilizes computer vision along with a robotic arm to automate certain tasks such as grilling and frying foods. And Miso Robotics has already partnered with White Castle to implement them in their restaurants. The current version of Flippy claims to have a 30% higher throughput relative to a human worker. And given the massive labor shortages impacting the food industry right now, automation is a natural tool to fill that gap. And we can definitely expect more and more restaurants to start implementing these kinds of technologies in the future. Also, still in the vein of automation of AI, we see what is probably the most impactful technology in this video in terms of the number of lives that it's going to affect: autonomous vehicles. And this technology is basically here already. Right now, if you live in San Francisco or Phoenix, Arizona, you can opt in to be a tester for Google's Waymo ride-hailing service. And existing technology for self-driving cars is already many times safer than human drivers in a lot of cases. Not all, but a lot. The technology still needs a lot of work in terms of scope and being able to deal with more complicated road patterns, but for the most part, it's ready. Unfortunately, and this is going to be true of many of the things that I talk about in this video, the issue is not really with the technology itself, but with legalization, regulation, and of course convincing the general public that it's safe. Next up, I want to talk about blockchain. And no, I'm not talking about cryptocurrency, even though that's obviously an area that has blown up in recent years and has significant potential. I'm talking specifically about the technology underlying cryptocurrency and its many applications beyond the finance industry. To understand why, I'll simply explain at a high level what blockchain is. In short, it's a ledger. And you're familiar with a ledger. I'm talking about dusty old leather books that people used to keep track of transactions or inventory. If you were an old-timey merchant, you would keep track of your goods with a ledger, and you would make exchanges with other people and make note of what goods were sent where and for how much they were sold. And then other merchants would make note in their ledgers of what goods they received and how much it was purchased for. Now, one of the issues with this old system is that it relies on both parties to accurately record and then deal honestly with one another. And of course, paper ledgers can be doctored, altered, discrepancies can arise. Conflict could ensue and make trust a significant issue when doing business. Blockchain provides us with one primary ledger, one trusted source of information that cannot be altered and can be accessed by both parties to ensure everybody is on the same page and that we're all dealing honestly with one another. And this is why blockchain was so significant in creating decentralized currency. But there are other uses for blockchain as well. For example, supply chains. Supply chains are riddled with transparency issues. There are various parties involved: raw material gatherers, local artisans, warehouse companies, insurance businesses, transporters, manufacturers, customs agents, distributors, retailers, and probably more that I can't think of. A product's life cycle, starting from raw materials, changes so many hands throughout the course of its life, and most parties only ever deal with a small subset of people who are involved in the full process. But with blockchain, you can digitally tag materials near the start of their life cycle, and then implement a software solution that every party can access to see who has what when. Not only would this be helpful for logistics and forecasting, but think of all of the times when produce has been recalled because of an E. coli outbreak or something similar, and they end up throwing away millions of dollars worth of food because they can't trace exactly which products were contaminated. Well, with blockchain tracking, you can specifically identify which shipments were potentially contaminated and drastically reduce the amount of food waste. For another application of blockchain, think of cocoa and coffee farmers in developing nations that live off of $1 a day because manufacturers and retailers soak up all of the profits within the supply chain. With a transparent supply chain, we could guarantee that more profits get into the hands of the people who need it. And if that wasn't convincing enough, there's another popular use case for blockchain. You've probably heard about digital wallets that track people's cryptocurrency exchanges and are cryptographically secured with a password, known only to the individual owner. Well, there's also such thing as digital identity. It could be the next big thing in simplifying our lives and giving us back control over data privacy. And to understand how impactful this could be, think of all the conversations you've heard over the past decade about data privacy and how people are losing control over their own data and how it's used. Well, with the digital identity, you could store all your personal information: address, social security number, tax documents, medical documents, credit card numbers, all in a digital cryptographic wallet. Then, when your doctor or insurance company requests access to your data, you can grant them access, but they can't copy your data and you can revoke access at any time. Obviously, this idea is kind of difficult to implement and would require a lot of input from both companies and government in order to figure out how to implement it precisely. But there are dozens of companies already working on this. And like with many things, the issue is not with developing the technology, but giving government and regulatory buy-in. The metaverse. You've probably heard of it. You might even be sick of hearing about it. Or you might not even understand what the metaverse is, and that's a reasonable position to be in, because even the people implementing it don't fully understand it. For example, I recently saw this clip of Adam Silver introducing Virtual Shack in the metaverse.
Coach Nat, rather than communicate by Zoom, to come down on the stage and demonstrate to everyone what you're able to do at these clinics.
Hello, and thank you, Adam.
Holy cow. I mean, we'd heard a lot about him during the pandemic, but I'd never stood next to him.
My role is to help coach, train, develop the next generation of NBA talent. I know all the best moves and am untethered by one single dimension. I can even make a free throw.
Before you leave, anything else you can do that you want to show the audience?
I can even be the real Superman.
And your first reaction to that is probably similar to the reaction that I had, which is, but why? Why do we need or want a virtual coach? What's their objective for creating him? And I think the truthful answer is they don't know. I mean, not really anyway. It seems they have a vision for a virtual basketball trainer, an AI that can optimize your gameplay. But they don't know for sure how well this will work out, or even if this technology will be useful. And that's because everybody who is developing technologies in the metaverse are kind of just trying things out, throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. But to explain what the metaverse actually is, well, I can explain it simply as the collection of technologies that integrate virtual worlds into our everyday life. This means obviously stuff like virtual reality goggles from companies like Oculus and HTC Vive, but it also means using your phone and potentially tech like Google Glass that augment reality with virtual features. You just raise your phone or wear your smart glasses and your world appears augmented with digital objects. So why is this important, you might be wondering? Is this a passing fad that's just going to go away in a couple years? I mean, there's no way that people are actually going to want to spend hours of their lives wearing big clunky headsets and exploring virtual worlds, right? It goes against the caveman principle, the innate desire to interact with the real world. We've had the technology to completely eliminate paper waste for years now, but it hasn't gone anywhere. A lot of people just still like having the physical copy of paper in their hands. People thought that digital readers like Amazon Kindle were going to completely destroy the market for physical books, but we still have them. So how on earth will VR and the metaverse ever become popular? Well, as with most technologies, it's kind of just a matter of time. Younger generations will become increasingly more adapted to engaging with virtual technologies, but also the technology itself will become more streamlined, lighter, sleeker, and integrate into our lives more seamlessly. The advent of 5G internet, high-performance computing, and edge computing will all come together to make today's devices completely obsolete in the next 2 years. And most importantly, the metaverse will add value to our lives that will be too tempting not to make use of. For example, many companies are currently implementing pilot programs to provide VR headsets as part of standard work equipment. And there are many benefits to this. For example, consultants no longer have to spend a whole bunch of time and money and burnt jet fuel flying across the world for a couple of hours of meetings. Now all you do is put on a VR headset, meet up with them in virtual space, and you can engage with your clients in a way that is a sufficient replacement for real life. Now, I know that sounds kind of spooky and even a little dystopian, but the goal here is not to keep all humans inside all the time so that we never have to interact with one another. It's just here to make some basic things a little easier. Prior to the pandemic, the idea of working from home was absurd to most people, but now people are collectively realizing that working from home is actually giving them time to do things they actually wanted to do, instead of sitting in traffic or wasting a day at your office doing nothing because you can't leave your desk until 5 p.m. And as a consequence, the work from home shift is probably the biggest collective improvement to quality of life I've seen in my generation. So those are the top 3 technologies that I'm excited about because I think they have the most potential to change our lives. And they're all happening right now. Are there any technologies that you're excited about? Probably something that I missed? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy this content, subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.